Great Expectations, Chapter 5, Miss Havisham's Story. The trip to London took 5 hours, but it only seemed like 5 minutes. It was a little past noon when the 4-horse coach rolled into the crowded streets of the big city. I was dropped off at Jaggers's office in a gloomy part of the city. I entered the front office and asked for Mr. Jaggers. "He is in court at present," said the clerk. "Are you Mr. Pip?" I said I was, and he immediately grabbed his coat and hat. "We have been expecting your arrival. Mr. Jaggers told me to take you to your new home," the clerk said, leading me through the narrow, cobbled streets. We arrived at a neat little house. Mr. Pocket, Jr., was painted on the front door and on the mailbox. "This is it," said the clerk. "I think you'll find everything in order." The clerk left, and I climbed the stairs. The front door was unlocked. I entered and looked around the rooms. I was writing my name in the dirt on a window pane when I heard footsteps on the stairs. A young man entered carrying 2 bags of groceries. "Mr. Pip?" he asked. "Mr. Pocket," I replied. I looked into the man's familiar face. He looked into mine. "Well, I'll be," he said. "You're the boy I fought in Miss Havisham's courtyard." "And so are you," I said, and laughed. "I heard you'd come into good fortune," said Herbert. "When I first met you, I had been invited to play with Estella. It turned out that Miss Havisham didn't like me, but I don't care. She's a terror." "Miss Havisham?" I asked. "I meant Estella. Miss Havisham taught her to hate men," he said. Over dinner, Herbert told me Miss Havisham's story. Her father was a rich man. He had a daughter, Miss Havisham, by his first wife, and a son by his second. His son turned out badly. When Mr. Havisham died, he left his son just a little money. He gave most of the inheritance to Miss Havisham. Her brother hated her for it, Herbert continued. He convinced a friend to pretend to love her. The friend asked Miss Havisham to marry him. She accepted. The day was set, the dress bought, and the guests invited, but the bridegroom never showed up. He wrote a letter to Miss Havisham that said he wouldn't marry her. Now I knew why Miss Havisham's clocks were stopped. She must have received the letter when she was dressing for her wedding at 20 minutes to 9, I exclaimed. "At that very hour and minute," said Herbert, "she stopped all the clocks and never left the house again." "You say Estella is not related to Miss Havisham," I said. "When was she adopted by her?" Herbert shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know," he said. "You know as much as I do now." The next day my studies began. Mr. Matthew Pocket, Herbert's father, was an excellent teacher. He taught me everything about being a gentleman. He gave me wonderful books to read, adventure stories, plays, essays, mysteries, and even comedies. He also showed me which clothes and shoes to buy, and he helped me decorate my room. He taught me how to act at parties, and Herbert taught me table manners. There were 2 other students in Mr. Pocket's small class, Bentley Drumley and Startop. Drumley was a nasty fellow. He was lazy and proud. I didn't like him at all. Startop was open and warm. We became friends. We went rowing in the evenings. Startop and I rowed my boat while Drumley rowed his own far behind us. One evening, Mr. Jaggers decided he wanted to meet my fellow students. He invited the 3 of us to his home for dinner. Startop, Drumley, and I met in front of Jaggers's house. It was impressive in size, but it needed painting and window cleaning. We knocked on the door, and Jaggers led us into the dining room. The table was already set for dinner. "Pip," said Mr. Jaggers, putting his hand on my shoulder, "who are these fine young men?" I introduced Drumley and Startop, and we all sat down to eat. Jaggers seemed to take to Drumley immediately. They spoke quietly between themselves. The housekeeper entered with the first course. She was about 40, tall and nimble. Her face was pale, her large eyes were sad, but I sensed a fire beneath her quietness. Each time she returned with a new dish, I watched her. There was something familiar about her, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I was sure I had never seen her before. The evening came to an early end. "I am glad to see you all," said Mr. Jaggers. "Mr. Drumley, I drink to you. You will go far in life." I was astounded that a man as shrewd as Mr. Jaggers could be taken in by the sly Drumley. It turned out that he would not be the only one.